Cattle owners generally were tolerant, figuring that this sort of thing worked out evenly for all in the end. But sometimes a rancher would take a real grievance to court. One of the more celebrated of these rare cases in the Mancos region involved Richard indirectly. His role in the affair has become so confused that he has been spoken of as one of the defendants, which he was not. Someone, it seems, had been rustling, not merely abusing the use of the running iron. A group of angry cattlemen, headed by rancher John White, joined in the summer of 1891 to hunt down the thief. From Texas, they imported a mysterious individual named, or at least called, George Ivins. In no time at all, Ivins managed to devastate the heart of every unmarried girl in Mancos. Mrs. Clara Ormiston, then in her teens and daughter of Justice of the Peace Milt T. Morris, once admitted she was one of those smitten. George Ivins, she said, was an uncommonly handsome young fellow with a real air about him. He had turned up in Mancos one autumn day on a fine horse fitted with saddle and bridle that literally dripped silver. All of the girls tried to date him, said Clara Ormiston, but he wouldn't date. This merely enhanced his charm. Only John White and a few of the other men knew why Ivins turned down invitations to dances and parties in favor of the solitary night rides through the valley. After these rides, Ivins sometimes appeared at the home of Clara's father. She would be awakened by low voices outside her window, see a flickering lantern, and wonder what her father and the stranger had to talk about at this time of night. After a few months, the Texan's behavior was explained when John White went to the courthouse at Cortez and swore out a complaint against 2 Mancos men, accusing them of stealing 13 head of cattle. To clinch his charge, White produced a number of cowhides, all bearing his brand, and his chief witness was Ivins, who told the jury he was not a cowpoke but a detective, and that while working as an ordinary range hand, he saw the defendants steal the cattle, butcher them, and bury the hides. At night, he returned to the place where the hides were buried, and after digging them up, brought them to the home of Judge Morris. The latter concealed the hides under his house until White felt he had enough evidence to hang the rustlers. Time plays tricks with memory. Shortly before her death in 1953, Clara Ormiston could remember vividly the romantic figure of George Ivins and the horse he rode flashing with silver. She remembered also, or believed she did, that Richard Wetherill was one of the 2 men accused of stealing White's cattle. Thus, she contributed innocently to the legend. Court records show that on February 25th, 1892, John White filed his complaint naming Orville C. Olds and Byron McGough, both of Mancos and well known to all in the valley. When they appeared for arraignment, Judge Peace H. Burgum, Jr. ordered each to furnish $400 bond, an amount which neither man had. Orville Olds, according to Henry Honker, was a struggling Mancos Valley farmer who had a big family and never seemed to be able to get ahead. Byron McGough was remembered as a swarthy, handsome young blade, a village Don Juan and heavy drinker. In his present trouble, he had turned to his best friend and drinking companion, Ed Cavness. The latter was one of 6 brothers who had come to this part of Colorado in 1893 with their father Jim to settle in Thompson Park, a small valley 7 miles east of Mancos. With the exception of Ed, the Cavness boys and their father were respected by nearly all who knew them. Ed, though, was a maverick. He had no money, but persuaded his father and his brother Matt to bail McGough out Cortez Calabaluz. Richard Wetherill entered the picture only when he and Jim Cavness together furnished the bond for Orville Olds. He had no interest in McGough. When the case came to trial, the defendants were found guilty and ordered to pay penalty and costs, which in McGough's case amounted to $532.59, and in Olds, $932.59. Again, neither man had the money to pay the fine. That court file shows that Jim and Matt Cavness settled Brian McGough's fine on October 5th, 1892. Richard and Jim Cavness paid Olds' fine on March 2nd, 1893. Except for his evident desire to help Olds, Richard had no other connection with the case. After this experience, Orville Olds apparently settled back into quiet respectability. Byron McGuck, however, proceeded to get into worse trouble. After fathering a baby girl, he separated from the infant's mother and cast his roving eye upon the wife of his friend, the man who had bailed him out of Cortez jail. The woman responded pliantly, and their romance soon became common gossip. Byron refused to heed the repeated warnings, and one night, when he was drinking at the Buckhorn Saloon, Ed Cavanis killed him. Belt Daly, who saw Mancos Lothario stretched out dead with 5 bullet holes through his body, described the affair nearly 60 years afterwards. Byron was sitting alone at a table in the corner when Ed Cavanis came in. Ed stood at the bar and ordered a whiskey. The tone of his voice told the bartender Ed was in a real bad mood. So, to give Byron a chance to get out of here, the bartender went over to where he was sitting and reached up as if to fix an oil lamp hanging from the ceiling. That was a brave thing to do, because it put him between Byron and Cavanis and gave Byron his chance to bolt for the rear door. Byron started to get up and then rested back in his chair. The bartender thought he had done all a man could do, and so he went around behind the bar. Ed set his glass down and at the same time turned as if heading for the front door, but he kept on turning. So, as he turned, he pulled out his gun and fired it until it was empty. The first shot hit Byron in the forehead. He fell forward on the table. Then Ed went over and pounded Byron on the back of the head with the butt of his gun. There were a few other men in the saloon, but they didn't try to interfere. Ed walked out the back to where he had his horse tied up and lit out, heading east on the mountain road. Everyone thought he was going to La Plata, where his wife was staying then, aiming to kill her too. A posse was formed to get him, but they didn't find him in La Plata. Maybe he knew they would play that hunch. Anyway, he had switched trail, and it wasn't until some days later the posse caught up with him. They found Ed Cavanis in his camp near Price, Utah. He didn't put up any fight, but came back peaceable enough. As I remember it, he was tried and sent up for about 10 years. Richard Wetherill has no hand for riding in the sheriff's posse. The day after Byron was killed, he left Mancos for the Hopi country with his brother Clate, Dr. T. Mitchell Pruden, young Bert Cowing, and W. H. Muldoon Kelly, publisher of the town's weekly newspaper. Ed Cavanis was found guilty of second-degree murder on May 5th. The jury, sitting at Cortez, recommended him to the court's mercy. This caused the Mancos Times to comment on May 8th. No one in the country has clamored for his lifeblood, yet so persistent has he been in his evil career that not even his manly brothers can find it in their hearts to condemn a long-suffering people for their exultation at his conviction. A short while after, Judge Russell sentenced Cavanis to 15 years in Canyon City Penitentiary. Byron McGuck and Clara Ormiston had been schoolmates together. As little children, they both attended Sunday school taught by Richard's mother, Marion Wetherill. Clara remembered that Byron was killed at just about sundown on the night of a dance that was to be held in the schoolhouse. The young people of Mancos had been looking forward to it, but the shooting put a damper on everyone's spirits, and for once the violins of Lafayette Gunman and Clark Britton and Fred Farmer's guitar had a melancholy sound.
New York City, get me to the farm, get me to the farm, get me to the farm.